Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Seed Speaks. My name is Ashley Robinson, and I'm the editor of the Alberta Seed Guide, and today I'll be acting as your host for this episode. On today's episode of Seed Speaks, we're taking a closer look at how private and public researchers work together to move agricultural research forward. I'd like to take a second to thank our guests who are here with us today. So we have Kamil Witek and Mitch Tuinstra for joining us. And then we also have Jed Christianson joining us. But we're having a bit of technical difficulties with him. So he's actually joining us via phone. I think you can hear us now.
Sorry. Am I coming through here?
Yes, this is a nice little miracle.
No,
thank you
looks
so
like
much,
it might still
Jed,
be a
for being able
problem.
to join
Sorry,
us.
I'll call right back on the phone.
If
the camera works, then I'll stay on.
Okay, I think we're still having some technical difficulties there. But anyway, let's just get started with getting to know our panelists here. So first off, Mitch, can you tell me a bit about your work at Purdue University?
So I'm a professor of plant breeding and genetics in the Department of Agronomy. I'm a professor of plant breeding and genetics in the Department of Agronomy at Purdue University. I work in the space of research and training, both undergraduate and graduate training. I'm also the scientific director of the Institute for Plant Sciences. The work that I do really focuses on crop improvement as it relates to C4 grasses, and the crops that I primarily work on are corn and sorghum.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And Kamil, can you tell me a bit about your work at Two Blades?
Yes, so I'm a group leader for Two Blades based in United Kingdom in Norwich. And Two Blades, we are a non-profit ag-biotech company originally from US with two translational labs here in Norwich and in US in Minnesota. And our focus is more on a translational science. We develop sustainable solutions to major unsolved diseases of crops. And we've been working over the years with wheat, maize, soybean, and potato. And nowadays I lead a group which is focusing on soybean.
Okay, thank you so much, Kamil. And last but certainly not least, Jed, can you tell me a bit about your work over there at Bayer?
Yeah, so I'm the canola product design lead with Bayer CropScience. I'm based in Winnipeg in Canada. And so we are a private company, but we work in a lot of R&D areas to develop products for farmers. I'm again focused on developing new canola varieties, focused pretty much exclusively on canola. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So we have a really mixture. I think we have the whole kind of research chain here. We have private, we have public, we have a group that kind of works in the middle there. So I think we really have a good mixture here that will make for a great conversation today. So let's get going with some questions. So first off, what are the positives of private and public researchers working together? Maybe I'll throw this out to you first, Mitch, and then I'll let the rest of you answer afterwards.
I think the real positive about public-private sector collaboration is that the researchers in those two different environments have different sorts of priorities. In my experience, private sector researchers focus on high risk and basic science research. Those are the things that they're recognized for and promoted for. A a lot of very strong programs in that space. There are clearly public sector programs that focus on applied research and applied crop improvement as well, depending on the crop and the system that you're working in. But oftentimes, public sector researchers have an opportunity to focus on high-risk research with federal funding or outside funding that will support that sort of activity. In contrast, private sector research focuses on application. How do we develop new varieties? What new varieties are available? How do we solve problems with regards to diseases or production issues, with weed control, with agronomic deployment? And really, for me, the sweet spot for public-private sector research is when we identify problems and collaborate and can use that diverse perspective to address the different aspects of the challenge. Public sector researchers can work on basic science, high-risk solutions as problems or as tools and technologies are developed. They then can work with their private sector partners to sometimes prototype solutions and think a little bit about the issues with regards to seed production, marketing, and sales for those sorts of solutions so that they can actually ultimately have an impact on the ground in farmer fields.
Thank you. And Kamil, do you have anything to add there?
Yes, so Mitch already touched on what I also would like to discuss. So first, I think Two Blades is a bit unique here because we are not really private or public. We are not profit organization, which sits somewhere in the middle of the agriculture innovation chain. So for me, the biggest benefit of this collaboration, because we collaborate both with public and private organization, is combining different resources, different skill set, knowledge, and specialization. So each of these organization, depending on the place in the innovation chain, will specialize more. Like Mitch mentioned, the public more on discovery side, very often the fundamental science. And then the bigger organization, bigger companies like Bayer would be more on the deployment side, seed production, distribution, seed systems, and marketing. So Two Blades is somewhere in the later innovation and delivery. And I can give an example. We've been, the lab I work in and I'm leading is based in Norwich in UK, and we've been embedded at the Sainsbury Lab, which is the world leading institution for plant microbe interaction. And we started here around 14 years ago, and at that time, Sainsbury Lab was doing a lot of work on the fundamental science. And we came as more translational lab to take these discoveries from the lab and move them further in the innovation chain to delivery and deployment. So we work more on the proof of concept, validation, and initial small scale field trials, for example. And then we partner with bigger organizations. We had quite a few successful partnership with Bayer. When we benefited from this fundamental science. We did some science and further discoveries on our own, and partner to move it down the chain and actually deliver these innovations to farmers, both large scale and smallholder farmers.
Thank you. And of course, Jed, you're coming from the private side of things. So what do you have to add to this?
Yeah, well, I think it's along the theme in that complementarity, right? And Mitch talked a bit about this, that a lot of public research has the flexibility to be more curiosity driven or more exploratory or what we call discovery research. And that can really complement a lot of what happens in private industry where we may have kind of exploratory discovery programs, but they're more focused on delivering a product at the end of the day. Mm-hmm. And so being able to transition between new innovation and then having the ability to deliver to market is important. But beyond that, it's really important for private research to have public research that's more in some cases, just survey research, right? We, as a seed developer, we have to worry about new diseases emerging, and having a public sector strong research background where there are people that can look into, how a disease life cycle works, how widespread is it, what the damage is. That really helps inform our product development strategies. And in cases, we've actually partnered and helped to support that type of public research, because that context and background for what we do can be really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, it's great when we see private and public researchers be able to work together, and there's lots of benefits, but there can be some times when things don't always go as rosy. So when we're looking at that, what are some cons of private and public researchers working together? Jed, I'll start with you.
In my experience, and they're not big cons, one of the difficulties is just that it's harder to establish a collaboration with any group that's outside of our organization. If I want to set up a research project with colleagues within Bayer, it's a matter of a phone call, a couple of emails, a small handful of people that need to engage. But if we're partnering with anybody outside of the organization, there needs to be a lot more people involved in approving. There has to be contracts and agreements, and those are critical to have really, really clear, transparent contracts and agreements. But they take time, and it's you need to be on guard always too, that when you're laying out those contracts, that any discoveries that happen within the agreements, that there is a clear mechanism for sharing credit, that anything people bring into the research is being used in ways that you're comfortable with by the other party. So that clear, open communication and contracts can be more time consuming to set up. And then outside of that, another big con is often there are perceptions of conflict of interest. And it depends on the particular research project that you're doing, how big a factor those can be. From Bayer's side, we're trying to alleviate a lot of those concerns through transparency. And so we have publicly accessible on our website a database of the collaborations that we engage in. But that can be something that needs to be taken into account when you're setting up these collaborations.
Mm-hmm. And of course, Mitch, you come from the public side. So what are some cons or struggles that you've encountered or seen some of your colleagues encounter?
So I've had the pleasure to work in a number of different public-private sector collaborations with lots of different partners, both from the U.S. and internationally. And if a project is defined well, and I think Jed did a nice job of talking about some of the issues that you have to very carefully lay out at the beginning of a project to minimize the issues. There's really very few negatives. But there are a few things that I always think about in terms of these collaborations that sometimes they don't look like they're that important on the front end, but on the back end of a project or in the middle of a project, working on addressing these after a project's been initiated, they can sometimes be a challenge. Jed already talked about IP and transparency. Those are really critical issues. Some other issues that on the public side that I oftentimes, when I'm a mentor for a number of different faculty members in my own department, that I tell them to think a little bit about is that oftentimes these things can result in delayed publication. So if you're a tenure track professor and you're on the tenure track and you're trying to get papers churned out as quickly as you can, publication is oftentimes delayed a little bit in these public-private sector collaborations, depending on how that issue is addressed in the contract. Another issue that it's both a pro and a con is when students are involved in these public-private sector collaborations. It's in the area of seed. Most of my students have taken up jobs on the seed side of the private sector seed side of the industry after they've graduated with their master's degree or PhD degrees. And one of the things it's really nice about public-private sector collaborations that the students get a chance to see, what does this industry actually look like? Is this something I'm going to be excited about? Sometimes students come in and say, I'm not really interested in working in the private sector because of my perceptions about how this works or whatever the case may be. But other times these students come in and they get involved in a public-private sector collaboration and say, wow, that's really exciting. I wouldn't have this opportunity if I were working purely on a public side or in a different setting. And so thinking about it from a student perspective of giving them opportunities to learn about what the private sector is all about is really positive on the one way perspective of looking at it. But it can also be a challenge if a student's dissertation project becomes wrapped up on a public-private sector collaboration where publication and potentially delayed publication and intellectual property issues might delay the development and publication for the student. And it's something that just has to be dealt with on the front side.
Yeah, definitely. Those are a lot of different details to think of. I really do like how you mentioned that it does give students that experience, because that is part of that's really important about education, is being able to learn about the different companies and learn about the different sectors. So it's a really important part that I don't think we always talk about as much, but yeah, we're always talking about how do we get more young people in our industry. And Kamil, what have you noticed on your side in regards to what might be some of those struggles in regards to these partnerships?
Yes, there are definitely some limitations and challenges when you work in this partnership, and there is a need to balance both private and public side. So when private side, mostly business, they need to make money, they have some competitors, they have to stay ahead of competitors. So there is this IP, there is be less publications, delay publication, less sharing of the results. While public sector, these are taxpayers' money, so the expectation is that science is open, everything is accessible, it's a benefit for whole society and useful for everyone relatively immediately. So this needs to be balanced, and in Two Blades we've been doing this kind of partnerships for almost 20 years, and we have some experience. So the way we deal with this, we work in this unique dual market model, where we, at one hand, we work with the business collaborators, with companies to deliver value, to perform project for them. And at the same time, we return the rights to our discoveries, to the IP, to use for the public good in developing countries for smallholders. And for example, we work with Bayer over a few years on different projects where we work on the major disease of soy and discover novel resistant genes. And now we pivoted from this commercial aspect to more smallholders in Africa, and we have projects in Africa where we can use these genes and our discoveries and knowledge to benefit smallholders and deliver the soybean resistant to diseases to them without IP, or we have freedom to use it there. So these are another type of partnership, public partnership we formed there, going from private to public, working with different organizations in Africa on the benefit of smallholders and society there.
Definitely. And of course, the goal of these partnerships is to really drive agricultural research forward. So how do they help do that? And why are they so important to be able to help drive agricultural research forward and really keep us moving in the direction we want? Because of course, if we don't move forward, we're never going to get those improvements that we want. Maybe I'll let you take this one first, Kamil.
Sure. And I think it's, again, going back to what I said earlier, for me, it's the combining the knowledge, skills, and specialization through the whole innovation chain, from innovation delivery to deployment, for the benefit of the public and moving research forward. And again, I can use some examples from us. Again, collaboration with our colleagues at the Sciencebury Lab, where they came up with a novel method of identifying quickly identifying resistant genes against diseases. So this was proof of concept, but the way the funding is in science works, it's easier to get funding for fundamental science, for this blue sky research, but it's much more difficult to take it through the translational process. And so in this case, we partner with the public institution, let's say, and then we got money from we partner with a commercial company with Kaneka from Japan, who help us to finance big translational project where we produce thousands of wheat transgenic plants, which then can be screened and show that this method allows to identify new type of resistance. So this kind of funding would be really difficult to obtain from the public money, from the public sources like BBSRC or other grants we have available in the UK. So by combining this partnership, public and private, we really move the science forward, the ag research forward, and created fantastic resource which can be used for improving the resistance, for making sustainable solution to diseases. But at the same time, we created a fantastic data set, large data set, which we can now use for AI, for modeling, for artificial intelligence, and move on the science and understanding of the disease resistance. And I think this was only possible thanks to this partnership and the type of funding it offers to us. So this was really productive to move it.
Jed, Mitch, anything to add?
I have a few comments. Or Jed, you can lead if you'd like.
Sure. No, that's a good example, Kamil. Yeah, the ag sector and ag research, are mostly focused with ensuring that we can produce enough food, fuel, and fiber sustainably going forward for the world's population, and those are key priorities for Bayer, addressing sustainability issues, climate change, and so on. And the interplay between private and public research are really important for that. We rely on public research to do things like come up with the models and predictions for how climate might change, and that informs how private breeding companies can try and develop products to address or mitigate some of those challenges. But it can go full circle, full loop. And I was thinking of one example, again, in the area of plant diseases, because it's where I spend a lot of my time. But as the canola industry developed, a really large problematic disease called blackleg emerged in the 1980s and 90s. It was research at a public institution at the University of Alberta that identified some of the very first resistant varieties. But as more seed developers developed more hybrid products that address different issues on the farm, a lot of them adopted that disease resistance trait from the public sector, to the point where by the mid 2000s it was in pretty much every commercial hybrid. And that actually starts to change the landscape for the disease. The disease starts to adapt to that resistance trait. And so you have a discovery in the public sector moving into the private sector, changes the landscape, and there's a lot more need for public research to understand how that change happens. There was more investment and collaboration from our side with public sector to identify new resistant sources and do the survey and monitoring to understand how the disease changes, because that innovation had a huge impact. It reduced crop losses for farmers. It reduced trade barriers for the overall industry, and it again went towards that goal of sustainably producing as much canola as possible on the acreage that we have. So it kind of goes full circle sometimes, where innovations that are deployed in the private sector change the landscape, and there's more public research needed to understand and interpret that.
And Mitch?
We've been talking a little bit. We've been mostly talking today about joint research activities and partnerships. If you take a half step back, another element to partnership is how do we have a routine discussions between public and private sector researchers. It's not something that's that easy to do. I just raced here from class, and so I'm busy teaching. My private sector colleagues are working on seed production research. They have their own agenda of things that are high priority, and everybody's really busy. But one of the key elements, I think, of partnership actually also involves making sure there's an opportunity for discussion and engagement. And when that happens, really there's an opportunity for collaborative identification of new research priorities. And so sometimes the private sector researchers know that there's an issue that needs to be addressed. There may not be a public sector researcher working in that space, but there are clear needs for fundamental research that need to be done in order to advance our understanding of how to address it. And when you have this ongoing partnership, it provides an opportunity to brainstorm and think of new ideas, and then jointly talk through how are we going to address this, what's the most productive way to address this, and how do we do it together. It actually provides opportunities and access to new data and data sets, opportunities to prototype new research infrastructure or tools that may not be possible either on the public side because of funding and maybe expertise, and or on the private side because of, again, it could be just a university is a nice place to do prototyping when you're developing new tools. The private sector is a great place to prototype when it comes down to seeds, because in many cases these crops have really robust, or they oftentimes have very robust private sector research pipelines, and finding opportunities to leverage those and prototyping and advancing the research is really critically important. But it's predicated on talking, and we're always so busy, we don't always have the time to collaborate in the discussion about what do we do next.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Is there anything that you guys would, either Jed or Kamil, would like to add on that and having that conversation between the two sides?
Yeah, no, it's important to have those forums. It could be research conferences, or we have some industry groups that bring together public and private researchers on specific topics. But those forums for meeting and communicating are a really fertile place to start collaborations. And that's a really good point that Mitch made.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a good point you made there, Jed, because one of those forums and ways to make those connections is through when we're looking at those grower associations, where they're the ones that have check off dollars that they put towards research. And they of course, they want to be funding public areas, but they also understand, of course, that there's the need for private, because you need the commercialization stage on this stuff. So yeah, that is a really important aspect that we haven't really mentioned yet, is those associations and the say they have in drawing research too. And we're getting closer to the end of our time together. So I'd just like to wrap it up with one last question that I would like to go around and ask each of you. You guys are all researchers, of course, yourselves. So what do you guys look for consider when approaching a research partnership outside of your company or institution? And I'll start with you first, Kamil.
Okay, so personally, when I look for the new projects partnership, for me, it's about passion and purpose. I really would like to feel passionate and excited about the project I will be working on, and it has to have the purpose for me. So it has to match my personal goals, outcome aligns with my values and what I want to do and what I believe in. So I like also when the project is within the area of my expertise and knowledge, so I'm confident I can deliver, but not always exactly the same project, something new and different. So it also challenges me a little bit, allows me to develop and learn new things.
Thank you. Jed?
That passion and purpose, finding people who have a good track record or look very promising in their ability to do the research. And then alignment of interest too, is if we want to partner with someone and we have a particular project in mind, is it something they're interested in? What will they be able to benefit out of it as well? Would they want to partner? That's really critical.
And with the last words, Mitch, what would you like to say?
I have a way of describing what Jed just pointed out, which is alignment. I always call it win-win. If I know if there's a win in it for me and there's a win in it for my private sector colleagues, in my case, because I'm on the public side, is very likely to succeed because there's something in it for all of us, and everyone's motivated to move forward. If you have, as Kamil had noted, if everybody about this is passionate with the project and there's a win in it for everybody knows where the win in it is for them, and it always helps to know where's the win for everyone else. These are much more likely to succeed.
Well, thank you to all of you for being here today. I think we could go on for hours about this conversation because there's just so many different aspects to it. But I think we really covered the main parts today. And I know I learned a lot, and I'm really excited to go back and listen to this and kind of pick out some different topics to write a story on. But thank you to Mitch, Kamil, and Jed for being here today. I really enjoyed speaking with you all.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ashley.
And for those watching, thank you for tuning in. And if you missed part of today's live stream, don't worry. We'll have it available on demand on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, along with our websites, and we'll write up a story too to go along with it. And if you have any questions about this subject or ideas for future topics we should tackle, just feel free to reach out to us at Seed World. And next week, join us when my colleague Rebecca Carmelli-Pelsack has some guests on to discuss busting plant growing myths with research. Thanks, and have a great day.